Hey everybody, this is Renaud Anjoran from Sofeast, and with Fredrik here from China Importal, we're going to go through a webinar, a quick presentation on the epidemic that's hitting China and now the rest of the world, and the impact it's going to have on importers. And Fredrik is going to help me go through it and add his own comments.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me today, Renaud. I'm actually in Hong Kong right now in our office here. Got back from Vietnam just on Friday morning, actually. So I will be sharing what I see and hear from customers, from suppliers, and how this is developing.
Great. All right. Well, let's get right into the presentation.
Okay.
So as I said, we're going to cover the effects of this coronavirus epidemic for importers who buy in China. And I'm going to go through this presentation along with Fredrik. So we're going to go through the effects. How much longer is everything going to be frozen in China? What about the staff, the effects on people traveling? What if suppliers cannot fulfill the orders? What's the impact, the broader impact? What about sourcing from other areas? What are the key risks that importers need to look at, and how to mitigate the risks? We're going to offer some ideas about this. So first, the effect has been very severe in Wuhan, in Hubei, and in a number of other cities. And everything is slowly starting to get back to normal, but very, very slowly. What have you seen, Fredrik?
Well, I would say that if we go back about 2 weeks, then that's when I saw things, suppliers getting back to business. What I mean specifically is that our customers started to receive quotations for samples for mass production, MOQs and everything else that you need to confirm. We also seen sampling projects resume. Okay, it could be everything from getting technical drawings and admin stuff. So most of our customers been busy with administrative stuff together with their suppliers, and it's been moving forward at a pretty steady rate for the last 2 weeks. We also have a few customers who just placed orders. Okay, just placed orders, some of which are scheduled for completion by the end of the month. So maybe we just been lucky, but given the fact that it was also the Chinese New Year, so for me it's been a bit hard to say when the Chinese New Year ended and the virus situation began, if you know what I mean. It's a bit blurry for me.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes. We've also seen the same. Salespeople have been active all along because they like to. They usually paid on commission. They're very dynamic and they try to push everything forward. But whenever we start to ask a few technical questions and they need to get back to the engineers or maybe the manufacturing people, then everything gets really, really slow and we don't get responses. But things have been steadily getting better, let's say. Now, there's also some suppliers that are just starting or that are supposed to start maybe later this week. And that's what they tell their customers, but there's no assurances that they will actually start on the day that they're planning to start. Some local governments have been very, very tough on them and said, no, don't even think of starting in February. You're going to start early March. So there's also some of that. Let's keep going through these points. So the local government allows the companies to restart. So when it comes to offices, I think most companies that have an office and have applied to reopen have had no problem with that in most cases. The problems are still mostly with the factories. And from what we heard, about 40% of the people came back to work in factories. Some of them lower, some of them higher. We heard of some companies with already 90% of the workforce that's back. What have you heard, Fredrik? What do you think?
Nothing more than I read in the media. We ask suppliers, and they might say something like, "Yeah, half the workers are back, but we don't have boots on the ground. We don't actually verify that." So, yeah.
Right. A lot of this needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. Yes. We've done a few verifications on site or through videos, and overall this seems to be correct. But obviously, there's some suppliers that are saying, yes, everything's back to normal, no problem. Just give us your orders and send the deposit. Well, that's a bit a bit scary. What do you think?
Yeah, and I would also like to point out that despite the fact that so far it's been fairly painless for our customers. None of the suppliers have ever said that, oh, everything is just fine, is as normal. They never said that. So they all they've been making us aware of the delays, and they do mention that they are not at full capacity. It's just that I don't know, like, what's the percentage, 20%, 50%, no idea. But none of them actually said that everything is normal. And yeah, that would
Right.
definitely worry me. That would worry me.
Yeah. Yeah, serious suppliers are not going to say it's business as usual. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so the key question is how long? Okay, the problem is there are shutdowns. So if some of the staff of the supplier or of the factory is in Hubei province, well, tough luck. Then they're not back yet, and we don't know when they're going to be back. There's also a lot of other restrictions in a lot of cities, but also sometimes in the same city, the situation is totally different in different districts, and sometimes in the villages, sometimes even the residential buildings will have their own policy, and they will say, no, nobody can go out, nobody can come in, or maybe you go out for 1 hour 2 times a week maximum. You just go to the supermarket, you come back, you don't do anything else, right? So this is preventing a lot of staff to go back to factories too. And so the thing is, from what we've heard, from what some of our staff has told us, people want to go back to work. And so the companies want, for obvious reasons, to resume production because their customers are pushing them very hard, and also, well, to make some money, obviously, also to get some cash in, and also the most of the workers want to go back to work. Is this what you heard too, Fredrik?
Well, I haven't had any of, let's say, the sales reps that we or our customers communicate with that try to avoid us, really. And we started calling suppliers about 2 weeks ago, maybe more, maybe 3 weeks now. I can't remember exactly. And they've been responsive throughout this time. It's just, as you also mentioned, Renaud, that they can't provide quotations if they can't get the answers, if they can't get quotations in turn for, a certain fabric or a molded piece or something like that. But when it comes to the workers, the frontline workers in the factories that we or our customers communicate with, or both, then yeah, they've been responsive. And I would take that as a sign that they're not really trying to escape from anything, because yeah, you got to make money too, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, so what we think, and obviously this is not based on any facts or any real data analysis, but we think that by mid-March, most of China will be up and running. Most manufacturers will be open, and maybe with 60, 70, 80% of the workforce that they have, and shipping some orders and so on. Currently, they're starting to ship a few orders, but there's a lot of shortages of materials in addition to shortage of workers for them. So everything is really very, very slow. And when it comes to Hubei, that wide province, there's really we have no idea. I don't know if you have any forecasts about that, Fredrik.
Well, I think it sounds about right when it comes to factories opening up, and that's also, like, it seems like that's the trajectory we're on right now in terms of the way we've been moving the last 2 weeks until today. in terms of factories opening up and the number of workers coming back, or orders getting production starting and so on. So yeah, at the current rate, it doesn't have to take longer than say the second half of March or something. When it comes to Wuhan specifically and the affected province, then well, we don't work with any suppliers there as far as I can remember. I think there's been a couple of sales reps that's been caught up, but
Right.
yeah, other than that, I have no idea what will happen over there, because most of
Wuhan. Yeah, we have some staff, some from Wuhan, some from other places in Hubei. The main problem is staff getting, um, locked down up there. Very few of our listeners probably work with a supplier that is in Hubei province. It's not on the coast. It's not traditionally an exporting province. So yeah, I guess most people can relate to what you said. Yeah. So another thing is, how about buyers who usually come to China? Some people fly to China once a month. Some of them every 2 months, 3 months. Can they do that? Well, a lot of countries have now advised their nationals not to fly to China. Um, there are still ways to do it, but just yesterday I saw some news about Guangdong province. So this is the province of Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Dongguan, and so on. That said, if someone comes from a high-risk area, such as Italy, South Korea, and others, they have to be on quarantine on arrival. So let's say someone from Italy who flies there has to take the flight, has to stay in quarantine, then do the work in China, then go back to their country and be on quarantine because they come back from China. This is just becoming untenable. And this is Italy, but tomorrow it might be France. Tomorrow it might be Spain. There's a number of countries now that are at high risk. What do you think?
Yeah, it's also a big problem in Hong Kong when people can't go from Hong Kong to Shenzhen, because then you end up in a quarantine for 2 weeks, and at least a home quarantine. I'm not sure about the technicalities of that, but I mean, I wouldn't be going to the mainland right now for any reason. And this will also impact trade shows that were scheduled just this month in March, being delayed at least until May. I haven't heard anything definitive about Global Sources or the Canton Fair. So it's worrying, because for a service company like us, we don't attend the trade shows, but many of our customers, they come here. It's a catalyst. So the fact that it's becoming difficult to go to mainland China, but also the risk of the situation with events, trade shows being postponed or maybe even cancelled, that's an even bigger problem for us right now.
That's right. That's a big one. Yesterday on social media, I saw some people saying Global Sources had not announced anything officially, but unofficially they heard that the show would be completely cancelled in April. Now, don't quote me on that, and it's not first-hand information. But let's see. But that can only make sense to me. Who's going to come anyway? There would be much lower attendance. I don't know. I guess some exhibitors are trying to cancel and get their money back or so. So it must be a tough spot for them.
Yeah.
But you're right. People from Hong Kong. Yeah, I'm not in Hong Kong these days, because usually I go to Shenzhen, Dongguan every week. But it's untenable. Then if I get there, I'm sort of stuck.
Yeah.
Wherever I go, if I want to go to Vietnam, if I want to go to see somebody in Europe or in the US, I'm going to be quarantined. It's it's not fun. So I'm really just waiting on the sideline, sort of. All right. So global impact, huge for sure. China is 20% of the world GDP. Does a lot of the manufacturing. Who's not going to be disrupted? I don't know. These industries after industries after industries are impacted. I used to think that, for example, for eyewear, for glasses, the frames were mostly made in Shenzhen and Wenzhou, but then we had to order new glasses for somebody in my family here, and the stores said, "Oh yeah, there's a longer waiting list." So that's in France for the glass itself, not for the frame, for the glass. Yeah, the base material for that kind of glasses is made in China. I was like, what? It's a process industry. It's very energy intensive. Why are they doing that in China? I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense to me. But China has been grabbing more and more of the manufacturing capacity over the years, and this is going to impact a lot of sectors. Um, Automotive, obviously, there's been a lot of news about that because they like to have just-in-time management of their inventory, but that's very risky when they have a long supply chain, meaning that the components are not made just next door, they're made in a number of different countries. That's really high risk. What do you see? What do you forecast?
Well, it's as you mentioned, shifting to other countries. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but shifting to other countries, that's something that just can't be done in a matter of weeks or even months. Yeah, supply chains are for many products very, very China centric these days. And yes, as you mentioned, even to the extent where even for us that's been based in China for so long find it surprising. So yeah, definitely that's also why it's going to impact importers not just this month but for quite a while.
Yeah, and we wrote here most electronics, a lot of car parts, but also think about apparel. I mean, garments. A lot of garments are made in cut and sewn, I should say, cut and sewn in Vietnam, in Bangladesh, in India, and so on. But the fabric and a lot of the accessories also are coming from China. These guys are impacted very heavily. So it's not impacting just China, it's impacting a lot of manufacturing, a lot of other manufacturing places that use intermediary goods from China. So expect some empty shelves in March, April, May. Expect a lot of e-commerce stores to be out of stock. I mean, e-commerce companies are going to be hit very hard. A lot of your clients are e-commerce companies, right? I guess they must be pretty stressful these days.
Yeah, like 90% would, e-commerce and Amazon sellers, even to the point where they are cutting down on marketing. They are cutting their PPC ad spend, pay-per-click ads, because they don't want to sell out. That's not something people expected 3 months ago. That we got to be sure that we don't sell too much now. We got to make sure that we cap that. We put a lid on sales for. Until we can get more products shipped over. Another thing that I also would like to mention, not something that I experienced myself, is something I just read in the South China Morning Post just last week, is that there's a shortage of materials in the garment industry in Vietnam right now. So it's not just about finished goods coming out of China, but also about components, about materials that have a pretty big impact, at least when it comes to slowing down industry in other countries. Not necessarily limited to neighboring countries like Vietnam, but could also happen in the States or in Europe for that matter.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Let's just move on. So you mentioned people who want to look for sources outside of China. And as you said, moving production is not that easy. I would certainly agree with that. So if you were already planning to move abroad, yeah, by any means, go and have a look and keep searching. But if you were happy in China and you get good quality, good cost, good timing, delivery, performance, why would you go somewhere else? Or maybe you need to reduce your risks, to spread your risk around. But why didn't you do that earlier, right? Right now, in the short term, it's going to be extremely difficult. I don't know what you think, but I mean, a lot of people are banging on the door of Vietnamese factories, for example, and it's like, take your ticket and wait in line, right? Well, you were in Vietnam last week. Maybe you can talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, and I've been having an interest in Vietnam for close to more than 2 years now, and we built up a supply network in Vietnam, and it can work well for certain categories: furniture, wooden crafts, food products like seafood, cashew nuts, and so on. What else? Bags, packaging, and as long as you can reach the MOQs. But if it's something that's like an say more of a Shenzhen product, a quartz watch, Bluetooth speaker, and so on, then yeah, it can be done, but you have to pretty much set up your own factory, which makes sense, I guess, for some. It's just not the world I'm in. Most of our customers, well, I would say 90%, maybe more, are e-commerce buyers that may have a custom design or sometimes a private label product, and they want to buy this from an existing factory, and that's difficult. So yeah, shifting is it can be done. There are great suppliers, and garments and wooden products. You have a lot more flexibility. It's way easier to source outside of China. Yeah, for many products.
Right. Oh yeah. Now you took an interesting example, Bluetooth speaker. When you think about this, if you want to replicate an existing Bluetooth speaker that you've been selling on Amazon, you want the same shape. Well, what you're going to have to need to get done in Vietnam. Let's think about it for a minute. You're going to have a new mold made for the enclosure, right? For the plastic casing around, since you want the same shape, and it's probably very hard to find the exact same shape in somewhere in Vietnam. Don't count on that. So you need tool fabrication. Most of this is still made in South China, so it's not going to happen these days. Then you're going to have to do the injection molding. Yeah, you can find some suppliers there. Okay, but then for the electronic parts, you're still going to have to import a lot of the components that go on the PCBA from China, and you can find an SMT supplier to do the PCB assembly in Vietnam, but it's going to be a bit more expensive than in China. And there's much less choice, and on and on and on. And then you're going to have to do the final assembly of the wool product. And again, it's going to be a little bit more expensive probably than in China, because they've been doing that for, 35 years in Shenzhen, Dongguan. There's a lot of competition. But in Vietnam, there's not that much competition. There's not that many good companies able to do that. And hey, they don't feel that kind of competition because a lot of US buyers have been flocking to them over the past 1 or 2 years and are willing to pay a little bit more just to spread their risks and avoid the tariffs that they pay on made in China goods. So good luck moving that from a Dongguan supplier to a Ho Chi Minh City supplier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think that people get spoiled in a way when they the way that Alibaba syndrome, the way that the supply chain becomes very accessible, and people start to believe that it's always been like that you can just, okay, I want this product and I want that product, how much for that, how much for 500 pieces, this ready-made, pre-packed, get it branded, and it's really not like that. You don't have the same option in many other countries for those specific categories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Okay, let's move on. So for most of our listeners who are importers of products from China, what are the key risks? So listed a few risks here. Maybe we can add to that. But the first one that comes to my mind is quality issues. Just after Chinese New Year, every year it's a little bit more risky because there's always sort of an expected amount of turnover in the staff at all levels, in production, maybe among some of the technicians, the engineers, the managers. Also among the quality inspectors, I mean, there's quite a bit of turnover in the factories in this kind of position. So you have a factory that opens up, is kind of disorganized, doesn't even know who's coming back, starting to make some products. Some key positions are unfilled yet. And then they get filled by someone who has zero experience about making that kind of product, zero understanding about what that customer actually really wants, and so on. So a lot of the learning has been lost. So this has been going on every year, just after changing the year. But this year, right now, February and March of 2020, is this problem compounded um, to an extreme, because there's a lot of staff, a lot of key staff unable to come back, and they're not even able to fill the empty slots to hire new people. So we expect a lot of quality issues. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, as you say, this is something that we see to some extent every year, and everything is on steroids. It's delays are longer, risk of quality issues higher, I would guess. We haven't had any batch completed from any supplier after well, says before the Chinese New Year, obviously. I think very few have seen that. So yeah, that's also a risk, and something that I'm actually quite worried about is the prospect of supply bankruptcy. It's we don't have access to financial data when it comes to companies in China or Vietnam or elsewhere in Asia, for that matter. It's not public information, right? So and even if it was, it would be updated yearly or something. So yeah, there's a lot of financial stress. You're a factory owner. You've been closed down through the Chinese New Year, and you're losing deposit payments because businesses are afraid of placing orders. Okay, they're not just worried about the delays; they're worried about placing orders because all this going on right now, and then you don't have your workers back in the factory to wrap up your existing production, the production that you didn't finish pre Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year. So I can only imagine that there's a lot of financial stress on a lot of these companies, smaller factories, and yeah, some of them got to go under. That's just logic, right?
Yes, absolutely. To your point, there's actually a way to do credit checks on some suppliers, but in a lot of cities, it's impossible to get the detailed, even the not detailed, you never get the details, but at least the balance sheet and the income statement, at a high level. In some cases, it's possible. So it would be possible to see if a company has good cash reserves, which usually most Chinese manufacturers don't. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Some companies are not going to reopen. Now, this is also a classic situation just after Chinese New Year. Some bosses just collect some payments, hold on some payments to their suppliers, and sell some equipment real quick, just before the new year, close the door and disappear in their province. And some Taiwan people do that also in China. This has been going on every year. But again, this situation on steroids. I really agree. And for again, Fredrik, most of your clients are e-commerce companies. Some of them have tools in in their Chinese factories. And if they're not sure the Chinese factory is going to reopen, I guess it must be pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So far, we haven't seen anything of that, but that's also because it's still early. I don't know. Maybe we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but that could also be a train. We don't know that yet. So yeah, it's definitely stressful. So far, we haven't seen any signs. We haven't seen any signs of any factory going under. Then again, I'm not involved in all the communication. Most of the communication is directly from our customers to suppliers. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if some of them will get back to me in a couple of weeks or months and say that okay, they just went belly up, they're gone.
That's right. Yes. Also, in our suppliers we work with for our clients, we have not heard of this kind of situation. At least not any serious cases. But you're absolutely right. It's still early. some of them might be saying, yeah, we're still closed, but we're going to open up soon. Oh, and by the way, you really want us to prioritize your next orders? Well, um, send a deposit now. You need to put some money down, and then we'll make it our priority. So they might be still collecting some money, but they might have already told all of their manufacturing staff, hey, don't come back. Sorry, we're not opening up. So that's a risk. Fully agree. Um, the risks. So I mentioned number one, quality issues here. Number two, long delays. Well, I guess everybody's aware of that now. The problem is some people might not realize how long it's going to take before things get back to normal. Because let's say mid-March, let's say now, let's say today is 4th of March. Let's say on average, 60% of the workforce is there on the manufacturing side. Maybe mid-March, 90%, maybe. That's a little bit optimistic, but let's say. But they've accumulated a lot of delays. A lot of component suppliers are late in delivering the materials. I think there's going to be a lot of catch up to do until this summer, probably June, maybe July, maybe August. I don't know. What would you think?
Yeah, definitely. And another thing that I predict, maybe morbid in a way, but I'm pretty sure that this is going to be used as an excuse for the rest of the year. Even if it's a delay that's not even related, it's going to be, yeah, but 6 months ago we had this and that situation. Because when you ask any factory rep, okay, a sales rep or something, and you ask them, why is this order delayed for 2 weeks? Oh, it's because it's our busiest time of the year. But that was 3 months ago, and the 3 months before that. So yeah, they're gonna have this card way beyond the scope, like the time frame for this actual situation. Trust me on that.
Oh yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. Also expect a lot of ISO 9001 certifications not to be renewed, just because people are super focused on the short term and don't really work on anything long term. Oh yeah, management systems, just forget it, put it under the rug, whatever.
Yeah.
We'll work on that later this year. A lot of problems also with new product developments. We work with a lot of companies developing new products, but the problem is the engineers might be back, but they are used to help with current productions. They used to help with the number one and number two customers that are banging very hard on the table and saying, no, you have to ship this by 10th of February, otherwise, da da da. Okay. And so a lot of prototyping work has been put aside. A lot of technical design work has been put aside, as the people who usually work on longer term projects, usually R&D, new product introductions, are sucked into the short-term manufacturing needs. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's been quite obvious with a few projects.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that they're actually taking middle managers and engineers and putting them on the assembly lines. Spoke to a factory, I think that was last week. He said the same thing, that that's the situation now. Sorry for not replying the email. I think it was something like that. They were supposed to stamp some documents or something, a production manual or something like that. And he said, yeah, well, we short of workers, like 60% are still out, they're gone. So yeah, I had to work on the assembly line.
Yes, yes. All right, and the last risk, and this is really sort of shot in the sky. We don't know yet, but I think there's going to be a faster increase of prices this year, um, for a number of reasons. First, in Dongguan, if you want to hire some staff now because you're in a hurry, you need to make production, you have to pay more, something like 30% of a 30% higher base salary than last year. That's for this very specific period, but I think it's going to have an effect on salary, levels. I don't know if we could say negotiations, but yeah, salary negotiations for the rest of the year, and it's going to have some kind of impact on the final product price. Do you see the same, or?
Yeah, I actually never thought about that. That's actually going pretty deep, but makes a lot of sense. But I guess it also depends on what kind of ammunition the Chinese government will bring in this case. If they will be, cutting taxes, or I don't know what they could do really. But I'm sure they could do a few things to, to reduce the cost pressure. Which
Yeah.
in turn, if they do, I don't know, tax cuts or maybe a VAT cut or something like that, then maybe that could, mitigate some of the, situation, which would keep costs, to the point where it might be noticed, even if the salaries go up. So, just speculation from my side, really.
Yeah, it's all speculations here, but you're right. I mean, China is going to have to scramble to make up for this loss in activity. I mean, there's no way they post a 5% growth rate for 2020. They're so far behind 2019 in Q1. So they're going to have to do certain things to stimulate activity. But yeah, just it's the cynical myself speaking here. In the past, when they reduced the tax rate, when they cut VAT and so on, most Chinese suppliers did not pass that onto their customers. And sometimes China does certain things to stimulate exports that are not very visible. Otherwise, they have troubles with the United States and Europe with the World Trade Organization, right? So they do certain things in a hidden way also. But let's see. This is really shot in the sky. And basically, the last slide here is about how to mitigate the risks. If you're really serious about keeping your business up and keeping continuity of supply, you need to work on a backup. Maybe not right now, as I said, it's very difficult, but later in 2020, you need to work on that. And if you suffer through quality issues or cost increases and so on, well, challenge your suppliers. How to increase productivity. What can they do? How to have a more consistent quality. What can they do? If there's a lot of delays, do they have some kind of planning system, or should they start to work on a planning system, right? Does that make sense, Fredrik?
Yes, to the extent that it can be done. I guess from an e-commerce perspective, what planning would mean is that they would simply need to buy, have enough stock. That's really the big issue now, that they don't have enough stock in the products that have a good sales velocity. So for some of them, that's just not an option to have that, especially as kind of the nature of e-commerce is you're always testing new products all the time. You're not really sure what sticks, and if it does stick, if it is a good seller, it may only be that for 6 months or a year or something. So I think it's maybe for big businesses that they have solid data. They know what's selling, okay, like toothpaste or something like that. But I think for our customers, it would be really, really, really hard to plan.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense for e-commerce companies. Yeah, have more of a buffer of inventory and maybe diversify. If you can buy a few things from Thailand, from Vietnam, from wherever, do it. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, for bigger businesses, we've seen a lot more interest in setting up, backups and contingency plans and so on, just to ensure continuity of supply. Yes, but they need to buy into the hundreds of thousands of the millions, not just $5,000 here and $10,000 there. That's for sure. Yeah, that's for sure. All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining us and listening to us ranting about all this situation. Again, my name was Renaud Anjoran from Sofeast, and my host was Fredrik Gronkvist, from China Importer, chinaimporter.com. All right, well, let's catch up another day. Don't hesitate to send us a message. Thank you.
Thank you.